The gloves coming off in the much-anticipated race for Kentucky governor.
My opponent is so partisan that anything good that's happened, he says it's the General Assembly. Anything bad is the governor.
Every day is a new lie from the Beshear administration because they are scared.
Democratic Governor Andy Beshear running against Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron in a deeply red state.
Andy Beshear has no relationships with our legislature.
You can't see just Team Red or Team Blue if you're going to lead Team Kentucky.
Tonight, both their plans for issues affecting the Bluegrass State.
He tries to bring big government and tear that away from our parents. I believe that our parents think they should make those decisions.
Look, I will not be complicit in Andy Beshear's war on our babies or war on our kids.
Both gubernatorial nominees setting the record straight tonight in our Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. And the competition continues to heat up as this year's gubernatorial election season enters its home stretch in the Bluegrass State, with voters heading to the polls tomorrow. It's one of the most closely watched off-year elections. Well, Kentucky, one of 3 states holding gubernatorial elections this year, providing a look at trends and a changing political environment heading into the 2024 contests for the White House and Congress. Now, in Kentucky, one candidate wants to make history, becoming the state's first black governor, while another opponent is seeking a second term in office. So tonight, you'll hear from both Democrat Governor Andy Beshear and Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron. We'll also have commentary from our political analyst, Professor Tyler Sick from the University of Pikeville. Now, both will tackle several topics, including the issue of abortion, which has been dominating debates in recent weeks. Now, this is video from 2019 when nearly a dozen states pushed for new restrictive abortion laws, causing protest and response all across the country. As a result of Kentucky's 2019 trigger law, that took effect when the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Roe's federal abortion rights protections in 2022. Kentucky currently bans the procedure in all cases, except when the life of the mother is in jeopardy. The state's law does not include exceptions for cases of rape or incest. In April of 2022, Beshear vetoed a bill that would have banned abortions after 15 weeks. He said he didn't sign that bill because it did not include exceptions for rape and incest. That veto became before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June of 2022. Now, Governor Beshear, who is pro-choice, and Attorney General Cameron, who is pro-life, both say they would sign some form of abortion bill that includes exceptions. And now to the candidates. First, let's start with Governor Andy Beshear, who's seeking a second term as Kentucky governor. Now, this election, perhaps the biggest electoral test for the Democratic Party. Beshear is the son of former Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear and the former Kentucky Attorney General. Now, the political race he's won only been by just a few thousand votes, including his race against Republican incumbent Matt Bevin in 2019. Beshear coming into the contest after steering the state through the coronavirus pandemic and weather-related disasters. He recently sat down with Eyewitness News reporter Gil McClanahan for a discussion on the race for governor and the issues facing the Bluegrass State.
He's the top cop, Gil.
Political labels are something Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear tries to avoid.
The issue of abortion, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
Where we are right now is not in that world that used to be pro this or pro that as it related to Roe v. Wade.
He worries about the victims of rape and incest.
We now have the most restrictive law in the entire country in Kentucky, where victims of rape and incest, some as young as 9 years old, have zero options. They're forced to carry their rapist's baby. I think that's wrong. I think rape victims always ought to have more rights than their rapists. My opponent has supported this restrictive bill.
Would you support a bill that bans abortions with the rape, incest, life of the mother as the exceptions?
Well, I will sign any bill that provides exceptions for victims of rape or incest.
On the issue of gender reassignment, he says he always opposed gender reassignment surgeries for minors, yet he vetoed Senate Bill 150, passed by the General Assembly earlier this year, that would outlaw the practice.
the Republicans said you lied, with all due respect. Set the record straight.
Well, you know that every bill contains more than one clause and one thing that it attempts to do. It took the ability for parents to make difficult medical decisions outside of that and in a much broader area. It tore away their freedom to make decisions for their kids, and it gave it to big government. I'm a parent. I believe that as parents, we should be trusted to do what's right for our kids, and Daniel Cameron disagrees.
Governor Beshear is quick to point out the economic prosperity of the state, saying since he became governor, there has been a record investment in the state of more than $27 billion. But many believe the prosperity is caused by the economic policies of the Republican General Assembly.
And yes, Republicans can have credit. Democrats can have credit because a good job isn't Democrat or Republican. And my concern in this race is my opponent is so partisan that anything good that's happened, he says, is the General Assembly. Anything bad is the governor. You can't see just Team Red or Team Blue if you're going to lead Team Kentucky. Daniel Cameron wants to point to a survey of individual households, but ask businesses. And they will show you they have filled more spots on their payroll, that we have more filled jobs than at any time in our history.
He says many issues pertaining to families should be bipartisan.
And stop trying to score political points against each other. I want to be a governor that can leave after 8 years of office and just see what we did together and how we made people's lives that much better and not worry about whether we put an R or a D on the scoreboard and who gets the points.
The Republican General Assembly, one of their biggest criticisms is you don't work with them, you don't go over there, you don't visit with them, you don't work together on legislation. I mean, is that legitimate?
They're going to say that in a campaign. I've signed 627 bipartisan bills from the General Assembly. I got things passed that they said they would never pass while I'm governor, like sports betting and medical marijuana. Time after time, we've gotten our priorities through the General Assembly, and the people we work with know it, but they're not going to say it in the middle of a campaign, and that's fine.
Who was the last Republican lawmaker you entertained in your office?
Oh, we've had a number of lawmakers in our office. I had President Stivers in on some future potential investments. We communicate, and they communicate through Rocky, who, of course, was one of them for 30-plus years. During sports betting, we worked with that sponsor on a daily basis. We talked to people in the hall. The drama makes all the news, and I understand that, but 627 bipartisan bills passing medical marijuana, sports betting, $500 million in clean drinking water, broadband, where we're going to get high-speed internet access to every home and every business. We're getting all that done. And you know what? Together, we brought in the biggest investment in the history of Kentucky at $5.8 billion. That Ford plant took a special session. So yes, the General Assembly ought to get credit. Our economic development team ought to get credit.
What area would you say that Daniel Cameron is most vulnerable in this race?
Well, I believe that Daniel Cameron is so extreme on so many issues, but certainly the fact that he will not look at a camera and say that he supports exceptions for rape and incest. Those were victims that I served as Attorney General. I mean, some as young as 9 who've been victimized oftentimes by a family member. They deserve options. He gives them absolutely none. But you know another one is he talks about crime a lot. And he says it's out of control. He's the top cop, Gil. That's his job. He has an office that is supposed to prosecute crime. Now, I run towards problems, not away from them. He tries to blame me entirely for this. I try to find solutions. And that's the difference between us. I try to create a better life for our families, and he plays that D.C. partisan politics game where everything is Team Red or Team Blue. I'm just proud to be the governor of Team Kentucky.
So that's the D.C. rhetoric would be the one area that you would say.
Well, I believe that he would be one of the most partisan governors we've seen, which we saw what happens when you have that under Matt Bevin.
Now, Attorney General Daniel Cameron also wants to be the next governor of Kentucky. He is the Republican nominee. Now, Cameron is currently the 51st Attorney General in the Bluegrass State. He succeeded Beshear, turning the tables around, mounting numerous legal challenges against state and national Democratic policies. Cameron is backed by former President Donald Trump and will become the state's first black governor if elected. He recently sat down with Eyewitness News reporter Gil McClanahan for a discussion on the race for governor and the issues facing the Bluegrass State.
Daniel Cameron and Andy Beshear have known each other for about 10 years, working together at the same law firm, but that is as far as the relationship goes, as Cameron distances himself from his former co-worker.
Well, my position is I'm pro-life, and I juxtapose that with Andy Beshear, who wants no limits on abortion and wants taxpayers to pay for it. And I don't think there's a bigger contrast between the two of us on who supports life and who wants no limits on abortion.
He says Beshear is indifferent to babies and students, which is why he shut down schools during the pandemic. He's quick to say the state continues to feel the impact.
They're behind on all of the indicators for success, whether that's reading, science, or math. Our kids are behind. That's why I put forth an education plan to catch our kids up. It's a 16-week program in which we want to have after-school instruction, and part of that be in the summer.
Back to the abortion thing. Should there be an exception for rape and incest or life of the mother?
Well, look, I've said if those things were to come to my table as the next governor of Kentucky, I would sign them. But again, this is about a governor in Andy Beshear who wants no limits on abortion, and then on top of it wants taxpayers to pay for it. Look, I will not be complicit in Andy Beshear's war on our babies or war on our kids. I think it's crazy to have a governor who vetoes legislation to protect women's sports from biological males, who vetoes legislation to protect our kids from irreversible procedures.
He accuses the Beshear campaign of lying about his record.
Every day is a new lie from the Beshear administration because they are scared, and they know that the only way that they can win this race is by lying.
He says a strong education means a strong workforce for Kentucky.
I stand here as the Republican nominee for governor saying that we need to increase the salaries of our teachers. We need to remove the bureaucracy that exists in the classroom. Look, my priority, as I've relayed and stressed this entire campaign, is about making sure that our public school systems get back to the basics. Make sure that we get back to reading, writing, and math, and our schools aren't incubators for liberal and progressive ideas.
He says in this election, that is on the line.
If you are concerned about those things, Andy Beshear will not help you, because he has demonstrated over the course of these last 3.5 years that he is beholden to Joe Biden and the far left.
What's your plan to increase teacher salaries?
Well, my plan is what we've seen in other states as well. We want to increase the starting pay of our teachers so that we can get more teachers into the classroom.
He believes this will cause a ripple effect with salary increases throughout the school system, and says he has already talked with the legislature about it.
Andy Beshear has no relationships with our legislature, and we need to have a governor that has connections with our legislature so that we can work on increasing salaries and increasing the pay for our hardworking teachers.
Cameron has been endorsed by former President Donald Trump and the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police, the largest law enforcement union in Kentucky. We also asked Cameron about the pandemic.
What would you have done different as governor?
Well, let me tell you what I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have released 2,000 criminals back out into the streets. That's what Andy Beshear did during that period of time. He had different rules for different sets of people, and he chose winners and he chose losers. For instance, in any given Sunday, you could drive by church and see that parking lot was completely empty. But at the same time, you could drive by a big box store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, take your pick, and see a parking lot full of cars and know that there were people inside that building. If that big box store was allowed to, with what at that time we considered to be guidelines from CDC, if they were allowed to be open during that period of time, why couldn't our churches be afforded that same opportunity, especially in the light of the fact that our ability to worship is protected by the First Amendment? Amendment. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that after 9 days, because I went into federal court, we got our churches reopened in Kentucky.
How many times have you taken him to court and won?
Well, I've taken him a lot, and I've beat him a lot. And you know what? Well, look, over the course of these last several years, I've taken him there a lot, beaten him a lot.
On the issue of the state economy, he says, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over the last 3 years, Kentucky had the largest decline in median household income in state history, and the state unemployment rate is higher than the national average.
Now, he certainly tries to take credit for decisions that our legislature has made. And he goes around and takes photos and goes to even some events, I'm told, that he's not even invited to. He goes to and takes credit for things that our legislature does.
What one area do you think that Governor Beshear is the most vulnerable?
Oh, I think there's several.
What's number one?
On the issue of crime and education. Crime, he let out 2,000 criminals. Just as of today, we talked about 50% of those have recommitted felony offenses, making our communities less safe.
And now for some perspective. I caught up with Professor Tyler Sick. He's a political expert from the University of Pikeville to pick his brain about the race. Take a listen.
As governor, I'll put Kentucky first, even when it's hard.
You've seen the campaign ads.
My opponent's campaign is built on attacks and lies.
Both Andy Beshear and Daniel Cameron want Kentuckians' vote on Tuesday. Political expert Tyler Sick has studied both candidates at length and followed their leadership, as Beshear in the governor's seat and Cameron as the attorney general. Sick explains what's on the line in this election.
The state has been trending red for quite some time. If Beshear loses, he's a relatively popular governor. He polls pretty high, has in fact been one of the more popular governors in America. And if he cannot manage to win, it would be a bad signal for Democrats in the state that this is now officially a red state like Alabama or Tennessee, where Republicans almost win by default.
We've been through a lot together, and now we're building the Commonwealth we've always dreamed of.
Professor Sick says it could be a tight race. After all, Beshear is a Democrat in a red state.
He's certainly an anomaly. Blue governors in red states are not common, and they've become increasingly less common. If we go back 20 years ago, there would have been plenty of blue governors in red states, but that's just not true anymore. So Governor Beshear is an anomaly. To keep his seat, he needs to prove, in essence, to I think a lot of rural voters, and that he's not that far on the left, that he's a moderate Democrat, that he can work with Republicans, that he doesn't take fringe positions on social issues. And if he can prove that, he may just succeed.
Mr. President, I hope you can tell that Kentucky is Trump country.
I'm the only candidate endorsed by President Trump.
As for Attorney General Daniel Cameron, how much weight would his endorsement by former President Donald Trump hold? Professor Sick says a lot.
It could have quite a bit. Trump is incredibly popular in the state. And there's a reason that Governor Beshear has continually ran ads that try to show that he has broad support among Trump voters and that he aligns with Donald Trump on criminal justice policy. If he could do that effectively, he may undermine Trump voter support for Cameron.
Sick says one issue in Cameron's corner, Beshear's controversial COVID policies.
The state continues to be very divided on Governor Beshear's COVID policies. Many people saw him as sort of friendly Mr. Rogers type figure who guided them through a very dark time. But to a lot of people, his shutting down of the churches and of schools was overzealous. And I think that plays into Cameron's hands. And at the end of the day, though, it'll come down on whether the voters thought things were going pretty well during the pandemic under Beshear or not. I'm not sure there's a lot of convincing to be done on this issue. The voters have already made up their mind.
We also asked the professor who he believes will be governor for the next 4 years.
My guess is it'll be Andy Beshear, but by a thin margin. Polls in Kentucky are notoriously unreliable, but he continues to poll about an average of 8 points ahead of Daniel Cameron. But he polled better than that against Matt Bevin and only won that race by less than a percentage point. So I think it's going to be very close. But it seems as though we're heading towards a likely Beshear victory.
Now, the Kentucky general election is Tuesday, November 7th, and polls will be open from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. And to get the very latest on the election, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on all platforms, and you can also find us online at WCHS-TV.com for the very latest as well. We'll also have the latest in our newscasts on WCHS and Fox 11. Gil McClanahan and I will both be live in Kentucky following the results of the governor's race. So thank you for tuning in to our Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. Have a great night.